And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to Monday morning's Off the Ball AM. As ever, if you want to get involved in today's show, feel free to leave a comment with us wherever you're watching this, be it on YouTube or if you're listening live on offtheball.com. Well, you're very welcome to the show. Thanks very much. We've got Byrne Driscoll with us in about 10-15 minutes time, so if you want to talk any rugby now would be a good time to get those questions in. We'll bring you some of Arsene Wenger's fairly angry post-match press conference after their 4-1 win against West Ham. We'll talk about the slaughtering that Declan Rice got from his manager David Moyes in the aftermath of a rookie mistake. In fairness, it wasn't a moment of glory for him. Joe Hart also pretty quick to point the finger of blame at the young Irishman. And of course we will try and shoehorn in some boxing as well after an amazing Carframpton victory on Saturday night. Rekindled his career. In the meantime, Johnny Ward, good morning to you.
How are you, Ger? How are you keeping?
The sprawling metropolis of Preston was your theatre of dreams at the weekend.
Yeah, our mutual friend Nick Royal invited us over to a Runcorn game. Runcorn are one of these a handful of teams who basically had to start over again because of financial trouble, and they reformed as a club. So you might remember Ian Wone, who played for Nottingham Forest.
Oh yeah.
So he was like their star player back in the day, but they basically went down to the bottom and they're trying to work their way back up, and they're on the verge of getting promoted to something like the 7th tier, I think.
Right, okay, yeah, that's real.
So in any event, their game was called off. So we were supposed to go to Runcorn, so we had to go somewhere else in that general region. So we went to Preston. Unfortunately, they drew 0-0 at home to Norwich.
A classic.
Yeah, a lot of teams playing one up top at the moment, and it just means
it's not great, is it?
Well, if you're playing one up top and you don't have a midfield that's overrun with kind of attacking options, you get a lot of games where there are very few chances, and this was another one of them.
Yeah.
0-0. But Sean Maguire came off the bench. He was very, very sharp. He probably should have scored, and I think their playoff chances are probably gone now. Wes Hoolahan didn't feature. Greg Cunningham played left back. Darrell Horgan didn't feature, and Brown had a very good game again for Preston. He looks a really good player, I have to say. But it's a lovely, friendly club, and it's I think it's the third or fourth lowest budget in the championship.
Yeah, no, they're doing amazing considering, like at that level, to be able to be competitive and to be of interest is not bad.
Totally, yeah. So that was my Saturday. So unfortunately, I missed the FA Cup action, but got in Galway United Shelburne on Friday night beforehand. As a Galway United fan, that was a bit grim. Not looking great for us at the moment, but yeah, busy weekend on the sporting front.
Yeah, not bad, and obviously a huge week this week as well with Punchestown. We'll get some tips off Johnny a little bit later on and talk about some of the other main stories that are coming ahead of that. But let's bring you through the morning newspapers.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
So the sports pages have sports stories have also made the front pages. Not in our name. This is the GAA. Neutral GAA warns both sides in vote campaign. The GAA has warned its members that the organisation should not be used by either side of the abortion referendum campaign. This is after the Tyrone coach Mickey Hart joined fellow stars in a GAA Athletes for a No Vote campaign. Unbelievable cheekiness when you consider that the statement that Mickey Hart's group issued was all about GAA values and how and then as Malachy Clerkin points out in the back of the Irish Times today, he's got no entitlement to speak on behalf of the GAA. So you can imagine that Croke Park was pretty pissed off with the fact that Mickey Hart was coming out, and certainly in the language of the statement, GAA Athletes for No Vote, it did seem as if it was an official GAA statement, when of course it was anything but.
Yeah, and as the Irish Independent points out as well, it was the ad was recorded in a GAA ground, which is significant enough, and I could certainly see why the GAA would react angrily to this.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things about the whole point of the GAA is supposed to be that it's non-political. Obviously, a bunch of politicians use the GAA for their own ends at various stages, and maybe this was only to be expected, but unbelievable cheekiness it seems. Van Graan defiant as Munster fall short again. This is Johan Van Graan says that he did the right thing by leaving Simon Zebo off, and that, of course, the impact that Simon Zebo has was the impact they expected them to have, just not that they were going to be so far behind before Simon Zebo came on. So we'll talk a bit more about that with Byrne Driscoll. And then Wenger says hurtful fans played role in departure.
Surely the lack of trophies over the last how many years played a role, though. I thought the fans in Man United when they went through various kind of, I suppose, regimes subsequent to Ferguson. I thought the fans were very understanding, and Wenger got, you can't live on last week's dinner for the rest of your life. Do you know what I mean? And I thought that the fans were very fair with him. There's an element of delusion, isn't there?
Arsenal Fan TV, I think he's pissed off with, and this is his first ever opportunity really to
go against them.
Yeah.
I mean,
clash of the intellectual heavyweights.
He was also asked, would he like to stay in the game? And he said, I'm not tired, but obviously I have a big emotional attachment to Arsenal, so it would be difficult after 20 years, but I'd actually love to see him get the Ireland job, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he'd be a great manager for Ireland.
He'd be brilliant, yeah.
At least we'd put the ball down on the ground a bit.
He'd play some football, yeah.
He'd probably be
I never linked him with the Ireland job, even kind of in my wildest dreams. I would have thought that maybe the France job after the World Cup.
I do think he may end up being an international manager more than a club manager at this stage.
Yeah. Well, that would kind of suit him, wouldn't it? And the French job was obviously made for him after this World Cup.
Absolutely.
Kind of see Deschamps maybe using this as an opportunity to get back into club football. Great picture on the front of the Examiner this morning. Donncha Ryan consoling Keith Earls. Ryan's final word, how Donncha and Rog destroyed Munster's Champions Cup hopes. This is basically the point being made by Donald Lenihan that Racing's defence bore all the hallmarks of Ronan O'Gara. He may be thousands of miles away in the South Island of New Zealand, but it's hard to escape the feeling that the defensive structure and organisation that he was so instrumental in bringing to the Parisian club came back to bite his beloved Munster on this occasion. Also, Donncha Ryan, absolutely brilliant. The line-out completely destroyed by Racing.
Line-out malfunction in Munster?
Yeah. And obviously, it's hard to know how much of that is because Munster psyched themselves out by the fact that, we're not going to change our calls, we're very confident in this. Their very first line out was like a short trick move, which got called back for forward pass. And you're kind of thinking...
That's not a good start.
Well, you're a little bit in your own heads there, lads. Give it to Peter Manny at the front. I mean, he always wins it. Give it to him at the front and see what happens.
As somebody who only kind of partly follows rugby, say Munster won the game, would they have been hockeyed in the final?
It's easy to say yes, because we'll never see it, and the disparity in performances between what Leinster did to Clonettley and what Racing did to Munster in that first half is it could have been a 50-burger. That's how bad Munster were in the first half, and then do you give Munster credit for Racing kind of taking their foot off the pedal in the second half? It's hard to do that really in any kind of, in any meaningful way. There's 5 points in it at the end, but the game is over. It's literally in stoppage time when the last 7 points are scored.
Yeah.
So, 12 points would have been a margin of defeat that flattered Munster.
Even 12?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
They were far worse than 12 points off. When the game mattered, Racing cards them open at will. So you would have to say, there's a huge gap at the moment between where Leinster are and where Munster are. You've got some of the other papers there?
Yeah, the Indo obviously has that in the front page as well about the GAA players. I'd actually encourage you to buy this today. There's some very good piece in it because Daniel MacDonald has a really good piece with Barry Maguire. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Barry Maguire, but he's Irish-Dutch, which is quite unusual in itself. And there he is in the Limerick attire after the 1-1 draw against Shamrock Rovers, which, by the way, if we're talking about managers under pressure, how Stephen Bradley is holding on to that job at the moment is actually staggering. They lost 3 in a row and then they drew at home to Limerick, or the Whipping Boys. But Barry Maguire, his father moved to Europe kind of on a little trip to find himself when he was 19, but he found himself settling in Holland.
Nice.
And he spawned Barry, and Barry became a very good footballer. And there was a tug of war between Ireland and Holland for his signature, and he actually ended up meeting Trapattoni. And then he scored for Utrecht against Celtic when they hockeyed them in the Europa League. And then he got this absolutely terrible injury doing pre-season training, I think in the States. Basically, Dan says what he needed was a 6-month stopgap to bring him there, and that's what brought him to Norway, rather. And a training exercise with Sarpsborg that involved 10 400-metre uphill runs through a forest. Afterwards, his back felt stiff. He basically he couldn't tie his shoelaces. He had to tie his shoelaces before he put on his shoes, and he had to put them on standing up. And he sounded really, really bad. But he's now 28, and he's trying to get his career back with Limerick. So that's an interesting piece. And also, Dan references the Shelbourne coach Davy O'Connor, who is running 10 marathons in 10 days to support Aware, and he suffered from depression in the past, and basically Dan says that he picked a repetitive circuit over road running. He's doing it in the Alsa,
Right,
to symbolise a never-ending feeling of mental illness, which I thought was really profound, actually.
It's not even 10 actual marathons where you're looking at stuff and...
No, so it's
10
just
different places.
repetitive. So he's just doing an ALSA, and it's what did he say? It's several laps, 10 marathons in 10 days, and 105 laps of the track. So that's amazing stuff, really. The Racing Post, obviously, big week ahead. I believe the two of us need a bit of an upsurge in our in our racing investments at the moment. The final conflict is obviously the front, and this is Gordon Elliott against Willie Mullins. Now, Gordon Elliott is attempting to win it for the first time. He's usurped Willie in terms of Grand Nationals, and he's actually usurped in Cheltenham the last 2 years, but he hasn't actually won the trainer's title yet. He's expected to do it this week, but it's going to be very tough. But Townend, Resurgent Duvan, the pick of Star Trio leading champions charge. And then on page 3, David Jennings makes the case that surely Sam Crow has to show up in the champion hurdle on Friday. So that's against the senior hurdles.
We'll give you a bit more time on that a little bit later on to get into some details of it. But we are talking rugby now, and let's bring you this. It's the immediate post-match reaction from Keith Wood and Liam Tolan and Brian O'Driscoll joining us on the back of this.
Leinster were very impressive. They did everything that they needed to do comfortably. They showed up with a high level of aggression, with some really good ball carrying from the centre, with the forwards doing incredibly well, with Johnny Sexton pulling the strings. Jamison Gibson Park had a really fine game. They were impressive from start to finish, but on the flip side of that, Scarlets barely got out of the changing room. They never really raised a gallop. They didn't get outside of their 22 for the whole game, and actually the last 7 or 8 minutes they showed a little bit of something, but not anything that we would have expected. So it was incredibly one-sided, very relaxed for Leinster, but they were impressive.
Leinster led by 15 points at half-time. We wondered what sort of Scarlets would emerge in the second half. I don't think they got possession of the ball inside the Leinster half for the first 20 minutes of that second half. Leinster did just go and strangle them, got the 2 extra tries, killed the game off completely. How impressed were you with the level of professionalism with Leinster during that second half?
Well, straight away, like, you got to compare the second half to answer that. You got to look at the first half, and doing so, Leinster came out. We were talking before the game. We said, well, what are we going to expect tactically? What are the both teams going to do? I was fascinated by Leinster in their own half. They mauled it, they mauled out of it, and as soon as they crossed the halfway line, they had a couple of preordained moves, but the speed with which they executed them, the way they got across the gain line, the way even Robbie Henshaw, each time he ran, his timing was based on the recycle of the ball, was taking maybe 2.5 seconds, so everything was going forward. Then they crossed into the second half, and all of a sudden Leinster started a kicking game, which they didn't do in the first half. So they said, okay, we have the buffer zone, we're going to keep Scarlets in their own 22, we trust our defence. So they kept chipping away and crossfield kicks and Gary Owens, and Scarlets just didn't manage, they couldn't exit, they just couldn't get any field position and scraps of possession. All of a sudden they had no answers to the questions that they were being asked.
Yeah, no answers to the questions. Brian O'Driscoll, good morning to you.
Good morning.
As good a semi-final performance, as good as a performance as we've ever seen from Leinster. It's like right up there.
Yeah, we're definitely right up there. Pretty complete, obviously, save for the 5-pointer that they conceded in the 78th or 79th minute, but you'll forgive them for that. Just defensively and in attack, very, very good. The continuity of play between forwards and backs, the control at half-back, the aggressive line speed, the centre pairings working together, having not played together for a while, just the whole performance I thought was outstanding, and they never really let Scarlets into the game. When you starve a team of that much possession and territory, Scarlets didn't really do a whole lot wrong. They just never ever got a go at them.
It felt like there was an intensity to the performance from Leinster right from the get-go, that like they weren't talking about revenge in the build-up, but they were clearly annoyed with what happened last season in the 2 semi-finals. The semi-final of the Champions Cup, where they didn't start that game really well, but they came back into it against Claremont, and that also they got hammered by the same team in the RDS. There was a kind of sense of mission about them, which when you add that to the quality that they have, it's very hard to beat. Yeah,
I think just the range to their game was the most impressive thing. They kept it in tight. They were very direct. They started a huge amount of the front door options. I think they got caught last year trying to go out the back door a little bit too early, and Problem with that is when players read through and smash it in, when you've got some of your team in front of the ball, then it's hard to recycle it, and the momentum all switches with the opposition. So they chose an awful lot of front door options, late footwork at the line from the forwards. The hard yards seemed to be a little bit easier to come by for them than they were for Scarlets. You look at the footwork and the agility of James Ryan and Fardy, and how they were able to get to soft shoulders, and just being able to build and regenerate made it just that little bit easier for the knock-on phases.
It also feels like it's a really different team from last year, like just because of James Ryan and Fardy and Levy. Like, it's only 3 players, but Jesus, what 3 players?
Yeah, they've been all outstanding. I'm part of the European Player of the Year panel, and Fardy's been nominated. We picked a 15 back in January, I think it was, and you can't break from that 15. But you look at the likes of Levy, surely he should be able to find his way back in there.
Should be a medical joker.
Yeah. And James Ryan has been outstanding. I think you forget a lot of those performances have obviously come through Ireland as well. Maybe they didn't feature as heavily early on, but Levy's been outstanding for the whole season, particularly in Sean O'Brien's absence. But Fardy just brings that cleverness, that Aussie cleverness that we've had in the past, and that we've missed when we haven't had it. You had it with Elsom, who was the big ball carrier, but I think it's almost a combination of Elsom and Nathan Hines, the savviness of that, of understanding when to play the ball at 9 when you've lost your 9. That little 1-2 to James Ryan, he's just so smart. Yeah, no Jameson Gibson Park around, so I'll play half back, and he doesn't wait for everyone to set up and for everyone to be in position. If it's there at the base, he plays it. Yeah, and away you go. Because if we're not fully ready, be sure the defence isn't ready. So
it's an instinctive kind of understanding of the ebb and flow of the game.
I think it's just he's a footballer, and that's why he's able to play second row and 6, and he's a brilliant addition because he brings a big edge to us as well.
Yeah, like
for Leinster, so I got to stop saying us, right?
It's all right here.
I know. I'm 4 years in. No, to Leinster. I'm a neutral.
Look, this isn't BT. It's fine. We can totally be us here. We get it. Was it you before the game was saying that the missed tackle count was far less important from Leinster? That actually, because in the build-up to the game, Dave had been terrifying us all with these stats about how, of all the teams that are left in the competition, Leinster have far more missed tackles than anybody else, and Scarlets like to, if you're going to miss a tackle in the wide channel, it's going to result in a try. But
they don't miss them that often in the wide channel. That's the thing. Leinster's spacing, I think this is what differentiates them from Ireland is their defensive system, and they play it slightly differently. I think their spacings are better. I think Ireland are more susceptible to getting caught in the wide channels because they get narrow.
Why, and how does it happen?
I think it's a spacing thing. I don't think their alignment. Well, there's 2 things. I think the Leinster wingers play way higher. And there's much more of an onus at full-back to cover the backfield, plus either the 10 or the 9. So it's really only 2 in the backfield, and then the Leinster wingers only play a couple of yards off their centre, whoever the second last man is. So they're playing much more aggressively. A lot of the time they're leaving last man over, and that's why they're playing hard up rather than trying to play anyway soft. So if the first pass is thrown and it's a long pass, sometimes there's an ability for a Ringrose to be able to read and get onto that. And then the winger just follows them in. Whereas with Ireland, the winger plays off a lot more, is kind of hedging his bets as to whether there might be a kick option, and that connectivity between 13 and wingers means you've got to automatically play a little bit softer as a 13, because if you go quickly and you miss your man, he gets it away, then your winger's absolutely screwed, because you've immediately created 2 on. Whereas if he's following you into that channel as well, the likelihood of getting 2 fast passes away is less so.
It's diminished. Henshaw and Ringrose have combined in a defensive masterclass today. What was it that was so impressive about them?
Just their ability to be able to read when it was on for them to hit through the line, where to close it off. And sometimes defence isn't all about making tackles. It's about scaring the opposition into going back inside. And sometimes I saw at one stage, there were massive numbers down, and Ringrose defended on his own and then forced an error. Just he forced the hand of Scarlets. They mightn't have wanted to do exactly as what he encouraged, but he just stayed off. But then other parts of his games, he's able to go, right, this is on for me. There's no viable option for this particular forward who's about to get it, inside or outside, so bang, in, makes a big collision, the ball can spill, or you get momentum and front foot.
Yeah, so defensively they were great, but also as an attacking unit, there was a beautiful long skip pass from Henshaw very early on in the game, and his shoulder's fine, because it was just a beautiful, fluid sort of, I think it said Issa.
Yeah, it was.
Down the wing.
The one that little chip kick in, and then cleaned up by Rob Kearney as well. And you could see how pumped players are when Kearney made a collision, and I think it was Steph Evans came across, and there was big hugs went around. They were really into that game, and I think they were I think they were stung badly about that semi-final defeat last year to Scarlets, particularly having lost a man in the game as well. They were beaten by 14 men. There's somewhat of a humiliation to that, particularly when you're at home. Yeah, when you're at home and you've got absolutely smashed. So they did feel that they owed them one, and whatever you might say about the home advantage and being unfair being back in the Aviva, on a performance like that, it wouldn't have mattered where in the world that game was. There was only going to be one winner.
What about Henshaw's recovery? It seems remarkable that we just saw the photograph of it there, that he can come back so quickly and to be at that level.
Yeah, it is actually unbelievable. It really is. So I've had a shoulder reconstruction. Now, granted, it's 13 or 14 years ago, from the surgical process, now it's all keyhole. Before I was, big slice and dice, and so immediately the recovery time from that is going to be extended. But they can do keyhole surgery now. But I think it's the level of aggressiveness within the rehab and how much they want to push it. And I must say, huge credit to Leinster and the IRFU for they seem to be quite cutting edge in where they're going with their medical team. They've had some really impressive recent Phil Glasgow and Winkleman have come in performance roles, and they've been absolutely outstanding in aligning the provinces with the national team. And what happens is players go into the national setup, and there's a national program and a provincial program, and they're not aligned. And so someone goes and does an exercise in the national setup that they haven't done at provincial. Straight away they're strained, or they're using muscles that they haven't used before. Then they go out in the pitch. They've got an extra stress of new calls and an extra pressure of, I'm in an environment that I don't know. So there was no cohesion. So they've pulled all that together, and I think that aligned with obviously Hannon Mullett, I know, was the surgeon for Robbie Henshaw, but he was able to work with the medical staff and encourage an aggressive regime to be able to push him back. And the rehab went so well that they were kind of wondering, was this an anomaly? So they went and got independent testing done away in Santry to make sure that all the scores matched up. PBs in the weights room, PBs in speed. I think Robbie got his best ever DEXA scan, which is body composition, fat testing.
He looked pretty sharp.
He looked fast, strong, lean. His big asset has always been his engine, and that would never have concerned me, because he comes back in the fourth, fifth game of the season every year. Usually one of the big games in lead up to Europe, and it's often Munster, and he's an 80-minute guy.
Yeah.
And that's why they were so desperate to get him back in there. As great a job as Issa had done in the centre, Robbie Henshaw's another level, and then you have the luxury of putting Issa back out onto the wing. And
then we finally begin to see the partnership of the 12 and 13 develop as a tandem, both from an offensive and defensive point of view, and they look amazing.
Yeah, they really are two very, very good players. And the more they play together, the more they train together, be it at Leinster or Ireland, they'll get more used to one another's. That element of telepathy will come into play, where there's no need for communication. They'll just read body language off one another. They'll dovetail. They'll share the workload, where someone makes a tackle, and what happens off first phase, when someone makes a tackle in the midfield, you've got to get a split out to the far side. So if the tackle's made outside of 10, he's usually the one to go. But if 10 makes it or 12 makes it, there's an onus on making sure that you get some speed to the extremity, and that's where you have to share that workload. That's where I watched during the Six Nations, Gary Ringrose coming back in, and Johnny Sexton was sending him the whole time from one side of the pitch over to the other. And that's his seniority, I suppose, and delegation of role, but also Ringrose's willingness to get across there and work for the team. I think, whatever about all the talent and the footwork and the physicality, but it's their willingness to work so hard for the team that I think separates these two. And
I think probably speaks to the culture of the group as well. Like, we talk about culture in sport as being so important over such a long period of time, and it was one of the things that Johnny Sexton said, the culture had changed. That time that he came back and gave them all that verbal rocket that didn't go down so well in the changing room by all accounts. And here we are, but everybody is making that. Everybody has that level of application, and they could all be big time Charlies if they wanted to be. Like, somebody like Ryan's never lost a game. Like, he could be, but it seems like that won't be accepted, and that's not the thing that they're going to be built on.
Well, not with people like Johnny Sexton in there. He's I think he's everyone or Johnny's brilliant at keeping tabs on everyone. I think he even saw the comments after the game talking about Larmour and the rollicking that he gave him when he called the ball to himself on the blind side when there were six Scarlets defenders over on that right hand side and there was a clear overlap, and he really let him know about it.
We actually have that clip. Have a listen. Here he is.
What did you make about Jordan Larmour? I saw you talking to him during the match as the game was going on. You made quite an impression.
Me?
I think it was you. Yeah, you were chatting away to him.
Yeah,
just a friendly chat.
Friendly chat. He backs himself. He backed himself against 10 Scarlets on the short side. And we had a 6-man overlap on the other side. I said, "Did you call for the boys?" Yeah. So he just didn't manage to beat one of them out of the 10. But it's the beauty of those young lads. They backed themselves, and look, I thought he had a great game in the second half. And when you lose a player like Fergus, who brings so much to the team, to have him stepping in, quality operator, was brilliant.
Yeah, it's a nice little gentle. Don't do it again.
Yeah, it is. It's a warning. It's a warning shot right there. But when Larmour does get the ball, God, no one knows what he's doing. He doesn't know, I don't think, himself. But that footwork is crazy, and that's why he is actually a little bit better at full back, because he gets more of an opportunity to showcase it. I think space. It didn't really open up for him at the weekend, but once or twice he created something from nothing. And
in traffic.
How good is he going to be? Like,
the word is that he's going to be really, really special because he gets it. And it's lots of these guys, lots of players come through, maybe not with that level of talent, but with huge ability. But you have to have the mental capacity. You have to have the willingness to learn and to work. The appetite for it, and apparently he has it all. He picks things up immediately, and I think that's why they're so excited by him.
Obviously McFadden gets injured in the act of scoring the try, which really seals the game. At that stage you can't really see Scarlets getting back into it, and if that's going to be anyway a long-term injury, if it's going to put him out, you'd feel really sorry for him, because he's just back from a couple of bad injuries and back in the team and totally deserving of his place in the team.
Yeah, I think I know he's his captain, and is he number one winger? It's a toss-up, I think Ferg has played himself back into the team because he's defensively so strong, because people always wonder, what does McFadden do? He's not particularly quick, he's not big, he's not that strong, he doesn't do anything brilliantly, but what he does do, and I think players have a full appreciation for it, is it's the element he brings at the ruck. So out wide, if a ruck needs clearing, he's their man for the job. He is actually very strong for a small enough guy. He made a mistake off the kickoff, which he'll be killing himself over, because he can't do that off scoring 3 points and then immediately cough up a scrum. So those sort of elements need to be cut out. But I thought, in general, his decision on just before the James Ryan try, he realised he wasn't getting in, managed to cut back in field, just recycle the ball. It's simple things done well, and he's very much a cog in the wheel. And I just think he brings a big security to the wing, where maybe James Lowe, which was documented in the papers a few weeks ago, he doesn't quite get it yet defensively. He's getting there. Yeah. But McFadden 100% understands it. Good in the air as well. So just a very well-rounded player and fits into this Leinster team extremely well.
It looks like Luke McGrath will probably be back. You would expect him to go back into the team. Gibson Park played well, but
He
not
played
well
really
enough
well. I think he played really well.
So maybe he keeps his place?
No, I don't think he does. I think Luke McGrath is still the number one choice. I think. But I must say, I thought he did have a bit of an armchair ride. It was, it was a gorgeous situation for any scrum half to come into when you're getting that quality of ball because of the efficiency at the ruck. I thought that was one of the real elements of Leinster's improvement
from last year,
and even from early parts of the season. I think that's where Ireland are really good, is their identification of the ruck and not losing too many numbers to it, not going to dead rucks. Realigning when you realise this ruck is done, how can I offer on the next phase? So I thought their pinpointing of how the ruck needed clearing. Also, you wouldn't have known that John Barkley was playing the game, or James Davis, and that's quite the compliment to our back row, because they've been two of Europe's best pilferers.
Does that happen in the video room, or like how do you teach a team to be better collectively at that over a period of time?
Yeah, it does happen in the video room. I think it happens at training. It's all about simulation these days. You can't be smashing into one another Tuesday, Thursday of a big semi-final week. So it all has to be simulation. All has to be body height, and then that comes back to video work. So if people don't have the body heights, coach will say, "Listen, we're not doing contact on the back of. I think you're going to show me good body height in the game. Are you going to do that? Although if you're not going to do that in training, we'll go back to playing full contact." I know that's what they do internationally, and I'd imagine that's still what they're doing in Leinster, because particularly at this stage of the season, you can't be beating bodies up. So it's about having good body shape and making sure that the picture is good. So then on Saturday afternoon, you're in that body position to be able to make that impact.
To go back to the obviously, if McFadden's out for a while, there's the possibility that James Lowe comes in, depending on how many. If McGrath's fit, then suddenly that's grand. You don't need Gibson Park to play. But it does kind of speak to, there is some depth in the Leinster backline at the moment. But if, say, you were to take one of their first choice out halves or backup fullbacks away, the way it's being mooted at the moment by the IRFU, by shunting one of them off to Ulster, suddenly you don't have a whole heap of depth if somebody gets injured.
That's the problem with your second and third string players. You don't want them to be that good. You want them to be good, but you don't want them to be really impressive, because immediately others will come looking for them. Yeah. So it's a tricky one for them, because they're going to leave, potentially they could, one of those, Carbery or Byrne, could leave a winning culture, a winning environment. You look at someone like Jordy Murphy, I have to say, he it can't be easy playing some of the best rugby of his life, both from a Leinster perspective, but also from Jordy's perspective, where things are clearly not going right in Ulster. They don't have a coach. A little bit of a basket case at the moment, and he's going up there to try and play his rugby from next year on, where, when the decision was made, whatever it was, 6 months ago, he was fourth in the pecking order. He didn't know that Josh van der Fleer was going to be injured, Sean O'Brien, and he didn't know he was going to get as much game time as he has done. Yeah. So likewise with a Carbery or I think it's more likely to be a Ross Byrne, who'll want to go and get more game time. That is, if Carbery is used a little bit more often at 10, Joe Schmidt has to be pulling his hair out that Carbery's only had one outing for Leinster, starting in the number 10 jersey, and he's his backup number 10. That's not ideal. So someone's going to move, and probably quite soon, just to get game time, because you can't have three quality operators at 10.
I would say no if I was the two lads. No, not going.
Yeah, but it's a tough one, It is, because I would too, because there's a good chance you're going to be winning medals, or you're going to be in the hunt for winning medals. At the moment, the Ulster are a while away from that.
Isn't the coaching better? Like, I have a coaching ticket here which has...
That's the other thing. So a young player...
How am I actually going to get better?
Yeah, so they don't know, not knowing what's going to happen up in Ulster, who's going to come in, am I going to improve as a player? Whatever about playing more often, what skills, what am I being taught on a week-to-week basis? So, I wouldn't be in a rush at the moment. Certainly, that wouldn't be my first port of call. But maybe they will be encouraged, or maybe the IRFU or Joe Schmidt will put an arm around their shoulder and have a quiet word saying, if you have aspirations to be involved in the longer term, maybe you need to go and look at playing more regular football.
Yeah. Wouldn't there be another way of doing this by giving Johnny Sexton 6 months off?
Yeah, but when? To try and take Johnny Sexton out of the game for 6 months.
I know, but like we do want to win a World Cup, and we have a collection of players here, and say you give him from the end of this season up to Christmas off.
Yeah.
That means all the November internationals will be Carbery playing 10, and Ross Byrne will play all the games for Leinster. Suddenly he's got like 10 massive games, and then Sexton comes back and eases his way back in, and everybody's happy.
That would be smart. That would be smart.
It's going to happen.
I don't see Johnny saying, yeah, I'll take 6 months off. The only thing I would say is that he's less annoyed these days when he's whipped after 60 or 70 minutes. Now, some have been forced through injury and some because games have been won and there's no need to keep him out there. So he's starting to get appreciative of the fact that he does need a little bit of minding. So maybe he's not averse to 6 months off, but you don't play rugby to train. You just don't. That's not his mentality, and I think he would struggle with not having something on a week-to-week basis.
Like go travel, go and
no, that's not happening.
Go and sit in the beach.
Bring your 3 kids with you.
Come on off the ball AM.
Well, but like there's definitely. I think the other thing that Leinster probably have is that Ross Byrne's little brother is coming through and is also an out half and is apparently very good. So, but say for example, it was Byrne to go. Carbery goes off and plays the November internationals or as part of that squad. Who's Leinster's out half for the 5 games in the league that they play at that point? Are they hiring an outsider to come in and play?
No, you can't do that. So like it defeats the purpose of it,
doesn't it? Yeah. So.
So I don't know. Listen, there's no perfect formula because of how we're centrally contracted, and it really works in our favour when it comes to international. Sometimes it feels as though on occasion it hurts the provincial setup because we aren't allowed to pick and choose from anywhere in the world. You have to go through through a process as to whether a player can fit in on the basis of is there an Irish equivalent in other provinces. So it would be stupid to kind of send 2 10s off somewhere and give Johnny a break, and then you're left with nothing, particularly in an important position like 10. But I'm sure there's lots of conversations to be had over the course of the next 6 months, maybe a year, maybe next season isn't the season to be deciding it, but we won't really know. The landscape changes massively if Johnny Sexton takes any time off, because then you've got your 2 10s staying put and there's no pressure on
and
them.
everybody's happy.
And I think they'll probably. Ross Byrne has really grown this year. He's gotten a lot more game time than he would have imagined, I would think.
Leinster really love him.
Yeah, they do. They do.
I think that he's got to make massive strides really quickly.
I think he's really improved this year. He looked like a nice, solid player, and I think he's come on. He's reading the game very well. His game control looks good. Joey obviously has lots of talent, and he's just a little bit looser. And he needs to just tighten it up, whereas Ross needs to expand his game a little bit. To be... I think it's unfair to say less robotic because he's not that, but I think to have more elements to his game rather than just being seen as a kicking 10 or a passing 10, to be able to then make himself the option.
One last point about this: is it definitely Ulster who are the main potential destination, or is it possible Munster needs to look at their out half situation?
Well, I think on the basis of yesterday, I don't think Ian Keatley had his greatest game. Obviously, Tyler Bladendoll's gone and had another neck surgery, as far as I know, and 2 neck surgeries for any professional athlete. I'd be concerned about that as to whether he's going to come back into the game or not. It's got to be a concern for him, but also for Munster. Keatley has been solid this season, better than other years, but yet is that enough to go and win Europe? I'm not entirely sure. So maybe, in Munster, when Ian Madigan was leaving, Munster supporters were shouting from the rooftops, we'll take him gladly. Why is he leaving Leinster to go further afield? So whether there's a spot for him to come back into one of the provincial teams, I know that he's on big money over in Bristol, and whether the IRFU is willing to pony up that sort of money or not will remain to be seen. But There are plenty of good 10s to go around. I just don't know whether we're willing to hand any of ours over.
There's that we again.
Fair enough. Right, some Munster. Here's Rory Scannell speaking with Dave McIntyre after they took a bit of a paddling, particularly in that first half in Bordeaux.
Overall, Rory, how frustrating is it to play in a game like that where you almost feel like you're struggling for air, that everything you try and the harder you try, it just doesn't seem to come out?
Yeah, the first half was quite frustrating. You know, we were 21-3 down, and I thought we played some quite good rugby in the second half, but when you give a team like Racing a 20-point lead, you're going to struggle to come back from that, and unfortunately we left our best rugby towards the end, which is disappointing. So yeah, we'll review it, and obviously our European journey's over for this year, but it's all to play for in the league, so we're looking forward to that.
Do you feel that turning over at half-time, just before half-time, they celebrated like they'd got a score of their own at the other end, that was one of the many turning points of the game?
Yeah, they rely on those kind of big moments. You know, they're big boys turning over ball there, and we were kind of camped in their line for a few minutes, and I think if we came away with a score just before the half, we would have been in with a shout. But unfortunately it wasn't to be. They got a vital turnover on the stroke of half-time, and you know, that could have easily been the turning point in the game.
And the second half, was there any belief still, or was it a case of let's try and win the second half and play for some pride?
No, I think we said at half-time we were pretty confident we could still win the game.
Yeah, it didn't really work out for them though. That first half performance from Racing was sensational.
Yeah, it was, and it banged a little bit of last year's semi-final with Leinster. You know, when you let a team like Claremont off to two quick scores, it's you're playing catch-up, and it's a bad place to be, even if you try and play your own game, because immediately there's a bit of panic sets in. You think, this wasn't meant to happen. We didn't plan for this throughout the week, and we've given them 3 scores. They haven't had to work incredibly hard for them, and you know, we've made some bad defensive errors and lapses, and all of a sudden, you know, we've only got 3 points on the board ourselves. They've got 21, and then before you knew it was 27-3 after half time, and they really needed to score that first try, or the first score in the second half, to just give them a bit of momentum. But they looked. Yeah, Munster did look flat. They looked, for the first time in ages, they looked devoid of ideas. I think once Racing worked out that the chap tackle was where they were going to go for the game, and the ferocity that they went into it, I think Munster looked as though they lacked in a plan B. And it just shows the importance of their go forward from their back row and from Stander, and what a great job that Racing did to contain him. I think he had 20 odd carries for like 31 or 32 meters. Yeah. And so if he has the ball in his hands usually for that, you know, that amount of time,
you make an 80 meters, 90 meters. Let's go forward.
He's getting them, and what he does when you hit high on him, he still gets 3 meters, but Nyanga was phenomenal. Wenceslas was absolutely brilliant. Claessens came on, he was outstanding. Leroux went through and you had a big 55 or 60 minutes. I thought their back row was absolutely top class, and that was the difference ultimately.
If you're going to compete against a team like Racing who are performing at that level, all of the things you do have to be perfect. So when your out half has a penalty, he has to find touch, and when you do find touch and it is your line out, you've got to find your own jumpers. Their line out was absolutely abysmal.
Yeah, their accuracy was poor, and the scoreline did flatter them in the end, because Racing were better than 5-point victors, but it was a very different second half, and particularly very different last 20 minutes from Munster. They got into their rhythm a small bit. They attacked them. They went after soft shoulders. Obviously Zebo came on and played well, but ultimately the handbrake had been pulled up by Racing at that stage. But that accuracy in the first half, when you are choosing to kick to the corner, you've got to make your touches, and then when you force a penalty in the scrum and you kick to a line out and then you overthrow or you don't hit your jumper, it's the knock-on effect is it dents your morale. You lose all the momentum. You lose possession, and then ultimately you lose territory as well. So they just couldn't. And then when they did try and put a few passages of play together, very uncharacteristically, they were throwing passes into touch. They felt as though their hand was forced of them.
How did that happen to a team as experienced and as good and as consistent all season that we've seen from Munster? All of a sudden, it's like the basics that you expect them to be able to do, they can't do them.
They just looked a bit shell-shocked. That's what it was. I think when no team this year have been as aggressive in their line speed and the chop tackle like Racing were. And when they didn't have any way of getting over the advantage line, they needed to go to the corners a little bit more. They needed to go to the air. Racing, from very early on, it became apparent that they were going to leave the last man over, so the kick pass was going to be on.
Yeah.
But I don't know if any of that was identified. I don't know if they had enough possession either to be able to really put a string of phases together, because Racing themselves were pretty miserly with it.
Is there any way they get in their own heads with Donncha Ryan in the line-out? Like even the first line-out, they try trick play as opposed to, as I was saying earlier, give it to Peter Manny at the front of the line-out. Just get the first one off and away you go, let's see what happens. But instead it's like that short line-out and a forward pass.
Yeah, and then it was like, well, didn't he actually even go over the 5?
That was
yeah.
What it was.
And I read Holland during the week talking about how Donncha Ryan knew their line-out calls, and yet you can't change it. You don't want to confuse yourself just for the sake of one person, but it really hurt them. Their lack of accuracy at line-out. Marshall came on and it was a little bit better, but it was when you are gaining penalties and you're kicking to touch and you're losing your first phase possession, how do you get any launch? How do you get into a game? Very, very hard. And you think about how few times we saw Scannell and Arnold carrying the ball into midfield to then be able to get Stander around the corner. The simple things that Munster have done so effectively.
Yeah.
Ball carry, pod around the corner and get over the advantage line. We saw hardly any of that. That's because of poor quality line-out ball. Their scrum was a little bit better. They got a penalty or two from it, but they also got, I thought JP Doyle was, particularly on the 5 metre scrums, he probably could have played things out a little bit more, or he could have had a reset of scrums once or twice when Munster were in the ascendancy. But he made them play it. And now referees do want, that we don't want reset scrum after reset scrum.
A card earlier for the persistent penalties from.
Yeah, you could have obviously looked at that, but I think they were probably spread out enough to allow them a little bit of leeway.
Donncha Ryan's pretty good, right?
He was so good again. He was excellent. His balance with Nakarawa, he does the grunt. He does all the hard yards. He brings the steel to them, and then Nakarawa is allowed, do all the offloading and the ball carrying, and I just think it's a magnificent balance of the two.
Yeah, a real pity that he's not part of the Ireland setup, and like that strength and depth doesn't exist for us at the moment.
Yeah, listen, as Joe Schmidt says, he's not gone, but ultimately he will be. I think if he went and picked Donncha Ryan now, it would send out a bad message. So I think unless
it's just for the World Cup,
unless Johnny Sexton. Well, see, you have to remember Ty Byrne's going to come into play now next year too.
Yeah,
so
he was even in defeat.
He was very good. That first play of the game, the maul that he managed to hold up. He's a nuisance.
Yeah,
and he'll be a brilliant addition for Munster, because I do think when it comes, they were exposed in the tight 5 last year against Saracens, and I think again they're just lacking a little bit of punch in there. You look at the two props, how good Gomez Sa and Eddie Benaroux as well were. They were so good around the park. They were chop tackling, they were pilfering ball, and I just don't think we saw that from the Munster front row either.
What else do they need? Like how far away are they?
I think they need. You look at the winners of the European Cup over the last 10 odd years and who's been playing 10 for them. So you look back to Leinster with Johnny Sexton 3 times, Munster, Toulon with Wilkinson, and Freddie Michalak in there, and then you've got Farrell a couple of times. Like they're all world-class players, and I think ultimately if you are going to go to a final and win it, you've got to have someone that's able to impose himself and run a game a little bit better than Ian Keatley has done over the course of the last few years, and they're just lacking in one or two positions. It didn't help them that they've lost 2 of their centres, Taude and Farrell. I think Farrell would have been a great addition yesterday, just giving them a bit of grunt. And then, it was a big call leaving Zevo.
I was about to ask, the last thing on this is like...
Because Wootton, got caught ball watching on that first Teddy Thomas try. I I haven't seen Vakatawa passing the ball as much as he did in the game, but I thought he had a very good game.
Yeah.
He mixed up really well, but he saw Wotton shoulders turned in, threw it out to Teddy Tama on an outer, and he just absolutely burnt him.
Yeah. So the Zebo decision was a bad decision.
Well, in hindsight, of course, it's retrospectively turned out to be a bad decision because he came on, played really well, and because Wotton was a little bit exposed. Maybe his inexperience at that level against that quality of an operator. He didn't understand the role of playing wing and owning the outside. As a winger, you can't get burnt on the outside.
Yeah.
Whatever about getting stepped back inside, someone has to, and your hustle has to plug that and get a shot on them, but don't get smoked on the outside.
Yeah, didn't help. Some quick fire questions. You wanted to talk about the player ratings.
Yeah, I just found this interesting because if you have, say, you 15 players in the subs on. Munster were expected probably to go very close yesterday, I would have presumed, if not win the game.
It was a 3-point game, yeah.
3-point game, and then you have, obviously, Leinster would have been expected to win. But just the ratings in the Independent today, right, so it's 5 or 6 for every Munster player apart from Keatley, who got 4. It must be pretty tough. That's even less than 5, obviously. And then you have the Leinster guys.
I've seen worse than 4s over the course of my 15 years.
0 from Frano.
Now, I know player ratings are quite tough because sometimes you're double job and you might have to do a match report. I'm not really sure about this, but 8 or 9 for every Leinster player.
I've never not seen a 7 on a win.
Yeah, 8 or 9 for every Leinster player. Yeah. 5 or 6 with 1-4 for Munster. So the notion that every single player for Munster underperformed and every single player for Leinster did at least an 8 is like the collective is usurping the individual here or something. It just, now I didn't watch I'm not a big rugby man, but for me it's just...
I think it's a valid point, I think.
Did they all play that badly?
I don't think anyone, I think Conor Murray get a 6?
Yeah.
He definitely, in the second half in particular, looked as though he was the best of them. Was every Leinster player an 8 or a 9? Listen, to your point, you're exactly right. They're double jobbing. They're writing the article and then they're thinking for a second, what will I give this guy? Leinster were very good and it was one of the most complete performances. So, as much as Keatley was the one that got a 4, who do you give the 7 to in Leinster that, he wasn't quite as good as anyone else?
It's kind of like you were talking about hindsight there about Zebo. It's like after the game, we have this view, well, they lost, so therefore they kind of all were disappointing or they didn't perform. But surely one Munster player or one Leinster player didn't quite get an 8, and it's just like you're carried through the emotion of Leinster were great, they all were 8 or 9s. Munster were crap, they all were 5 or 6.
Do you know what the funny thing with Munster was? With 90 seconds, if they'd scored a minute earlier,
there would have been something happening at that.
It would have been a kickoff.
Yeah.
So in all victories and all defeats, yes, they were outplayed, but they were only 1 score in the end. They just ran out of time.
How tough is that for Keatley now? We'll say if he were deemed to have kind of choked yesterday, if you want to use that. I didn't see the game. But and you're talking now about they need a new out half, and he just happens to see the papers. Well, I got a 4. Professionally, that must be very, very tough to deal with.
Yeah, today is not a day for reading papers as a professional. Don't go opening anything up. You don't. You have to know when and when not to. But also, he's an experienced player. He's 30 years of age now. He knows whether to, who to be listening to, who not. Does he ever look at them? Don't look at them. If you're going to look at them in the bad, don't look at them in the good too, because...
what were you like in your day?
I knew when not to read the papers. I knew what to... Of course, your ego wants a little bit of a tickle when you've gone well and see what people are saying. But you get that on social media as well. You don't have to go to the paper anymore. So whether you stay off social media... Because people, particularly on Twitter, people are pretty scathing. I'd be just doing a day of Instagram because people are so much nicer on there.
Pinterest. Two quick... some quick...
Twitter stock has fallen dramatically in the last minute.
Does Brian think Toulon are a better team than Racing, and as a result would have been a tougher final for Leinster, asks Peter Horan?
Well, Racing, the way they played yesterday, they'll be a handful, but I think Toulon, I was really glad to see Toulon out of the competition because I felt that they were the best French team.
Yeah.
And they packed the most punch. So
that opening 20 minutes would be, but like if Racing can do that over 60 minutes.
But you can't, I don't think Leinster will be nearly as passive as that. And also, Racing have played their card with that's what they're capable of. So, the Leinster should be playing scared in the first 20 minutes at the prospect of conceding a couple of scores out of Munster and then chasing the game. So I don't think that will happen.
What about Teddy Thomas showboating, asks Porrick Sweeney?
That was absolutely nuts.
I've never seen anything like it.
I literally couldn't believe it. But by the way, he was on a hat-trick, a 20-minute hat-trick. Who gives that up? And then to your captain, it's like, I know you're trying to get guys on side, but what if he wasn't expecting? He went in for a hug.
Which he could have done and dropped it.
Could easily have done.
And that would have been amazing. Should one of Byrne or Carbery also consider Connacht? Surely being number one somewhere is better than getting splinters on the bench from a long-term international career perspective.
They've just signed this guy from David. His surname escapes me, from the Brumbies. Who plays 10 and 12, David Horwitz. Yeah. So, so he's coming in. So, listen, let's not forget about Connacht as well.
That job appears to be gone.
But they can play him at 12, but Bundy's at 12. So are you pushing him to 13 and all of that? So they've gone and stocked up there, and they've obviously paid big dough for an overseas player. So I think Connacht are also another team in need of a player just to build their team around at 10, and I hope they've signed him on at least 3 year.
In hindsight, was the trip to South Africa a negative for Munster?
Do you know what? You can look at it now, and whatever it is, it's is it 8,000 odd miles down there, so 16,000 mile round trip is not ideal when, again, a retrospective reflection.
First 20 minutes.
Retrospectively,
jet lagged.
Yeah, it was hot. It was interesting listening to Peter O'Mahony and Joan Van Graan talking about how hot it was going to be, how it's it's certainly not in their favour.
They had spoken of it being a great bonding exercise.
And
you're kind of like,
so you've got to spin it the best possible way. There's no point in going down to South Africa and going, this isn't ideal in advance of a semi-final. We'll be exhausted. So they did. And they went down. They had 2 good wins. Morale boost. An opportunity to get away for a couple of weeks together, which you rarely get to do as a provincial side. So they looked like a team that was tired, though, because I was speaking to some of the Leinster guys, and they said that trip did really knock the stuffing out of them when they did it earlier in the year. So, maybe looking back now, it had an impact on them, but it just shows you cannot give any team at that level, at semi-final level, a head start and expect to chase them.
Last one for now is we had a poll on Friday about Ireland's best rugby import over the last decades. Because it's Twitter, you can only have 4 options: Brad Thorne, Dougie Howlett, Ruan Pinar and Issa. Runaway winner.
Rhetorical, isn't it?
It is. 51% of the vote was Issa.
51?
Yeah.
And Pinar then?
Pinar 26, Dougie 21.
And who was the 4th? Rocky?
Brad Thorne.
Oh, Brad Thorne.
I would have put Rocky in personally, but I wasn't in the office when the poll was made. But yeah, I mean, Issa's career is ridiculous.
Yeah, he's the common denominator on all success.
Yeah.
He's got to be playing in his 4th final, Heineken Cup or Champions Cup final. He's lost at least 2 Pro 12 finals or Magners finals, and won a Challenge Cup. He's been pretty good for Leinster.
Should they keep him as a coach? Is there a possibility of adding him?
I think he's ready to go home. Do you know what? It's funny, I haven't spoken to him for ages, but you get to a certain age, is he 35 or 36 now? And whatever about the body waning as well, I think sometimes, you feel it, you get to a point where there's a disconnect from you and the 20, 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy when you're the oldest guy and some of your pals are gone. Shane Jennings, a good friend of his. I know he's still pally with the likes of John Fogarty and that, but when guys on the pitch, when you're looking down, you're going, I'm actually getting to the point where I could be your father or soon to be. I don't know, I think I need to exit stage left. So I'm not surprised that he's finishing up, because he's still, you know what, he looks as though he's someone, and I get the sense that, similar to me in my final year, that you're treading water a little bit. You do feel a bit vulnerable, particularly out on the wing. I think he looks really good and secure in the centre, but that's because there's help all around him. Whereas, because he's savvy, he won't get exposed badly on the wing. But it's just getting away from him a little bit. The gas that was once there isn't really anymore.
Yeah, so hopefully he can put a proper crown on it with one last title.
Yeah, and a performance similar to the quarters or semis, I think they'll be a tough team to beat.
Yeah, good stuff, Brian. Thanks very much. A reminder, OTBAM is brought to you this morning with Air, the home of Air Sports. You can get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. Let's talk even some Arsene Wenger. Here he is, hurt, speaking to the press after yesterday's win against West Ham in the Emirates.
We are professional and we focus on our job, and to be professional means that you're capable to do your job, even if emotionally it's a little bit special. And that's what I did my whole life, I was not always in easy circumstances. And I believe that to be professional is always to prioritize your job, and I will continue to do that as long as I'm here.
Austin, it's been a while since the fans have chanted only one Arsene Wenger with such vociferousness, such volume. That must have been quite a special moment for you.
Look, I'm happy when our fans are happy. I'm even ready to suffer to make them happy. If sometimes they make me happy as well, I'm happy. I take it, but I think every single decision I made in my 22 years is for the good and the sake of Arsenal. Even when there were wrong decisions, it was always with one priority, was to do well for the club. And I tried to influence the club on the structural side, on the development of the individual players, and on, of course, the style of play and the result.
Yeah. He's talking about Arsenal Fan TV and the outrage that came from the terraces, and yet that's the rules of engagement, right? You set the tone of the level of success people can expect. That 98 team, the Invincibles, that's the level of success that you've brought to the club. Therefore, when you fall below your own high standards, you're going to be held to account, and the fans do it in the way the fans do. And mostly within the ground, they were actually fine. There was no real significant sustained period of Wenger out properly. There was some, but not the worst you've seen in football. Arsenal Fan TV was obviously a whole nother level of brand new, proper use of YouTube for the first time to mobilise fans' anger. And I have some sympathy for him as a human being, but as a football manager, unfortunately, they are the rules of engagement.
Yeah, and however far they are behind Manchester City, you could kind of say that's okay, but they're so far off fourth even this season, and there's just such a soft underbelly there. I know it's easy to say, Arsenal are a bit flaky, but they really do look at it, and the players he's brought in, they don't have the steel they have, and just the way that club is run as well. It was almost like Wenger was a convenient manager in the sense that we're making a profit, we're making the Champions League, and after that we can sort of float along and hopefully make the Champions League again. But Arsenal, historically is a really big club, and if you're looking for the new manager going in there, there's a huge potential there. London club with
an amazing stadium,
with the potential to make a lot of money really, and to bring in players, and for a player that might want to move to the Premier League, why not Arsenal? If they bring in an exciting new coach, or living in London for the wife or girlfriend, that's a lot more attractive than probably living in Manchester as well. And it's a lot more attractive for the player to live in a city like London, playing the Champions League in the future, hopefully. But I think the average spell of the Premier League manager is 2.6 years, and it's 1.6 if you take him away. So the era of that longevity sadly is gone. The point has been made that Alex Ferguson bombed at the start, and Stephen Bradley's kind of a year and a half into Shamrock Rovers now, and he's really having a bad time. But people might argue, well, he needs time, and he can overcome this. But I think with Wenger, Brian was talking about the players who maybe just you feel the gas is running out a bit. I think as a manager, the gas was running out with Wenger. Right? Coaches need to evolve as well nowadays. If you look what Guardiola is doing in terms of Kevin Poulin had a great article in the Racing Post today. He was on about they've improved their possession stats by 6% this season compared to last. So I think that 71% of the ball versus 65 last year. That's huge. That's a major difference. So if you don't have the ball against the likes of Man City, I've slagged Cork City about this as well, that they've just cede possession, that they just hit the ball long. And I said, that's fine against bad teams, but you're not going to get away with that longer term. Arsenal haven't really evolved. And I think Wenger, we spoke about Mickey Hart earlier, I think there are big parallels between the two of them. I think that a bit like a guy who's in a job, in a bit like a president, like who's kind of president for life almost, or he's in the job too long, he kind of probably loses sight of the bigger picture. And it's like, I have a lifespan here as well. And I think Wenger, it was actually sad to watch the last few years, I felt, because he just seems a good man.
Yeah,
and it was sad to watch.
It's funny that they've got Atletico Madrid in the Europa League, because you can see somebody like Simeone coming in and just electrifying the whole place. Suddenly they're one of the most relevant clubs in world football. They have anybody who pays any attention to the NFL will have seen what's happened with Stan Kroenke's team. So he moves them from St. Louis to LA, and their first season not great, but their second season they get this hotshot 31-year-old coach who fixes their quarterback, who has this brilliant attacking philosophy, and then they go and they sign all the big name available free agents this summer. So they've just put together one of the greatest NFL rosters that we've ever seen, and the dream team. They've got to live up to it this year. They've got to build on it, but they've signed aggressive, angry defenders. They've signed hotshot receivers. They've done everything that you possibly can to achieve success. And maybe we were wrong about Kroenke. Maybe Kroenke wasn't just happy to take the money. He does want the success as well. So I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he just decided, well, we're rich from this. The whole point of being involved is that we want to win. And they do go out and spend 15 million on Simeone, or say whatever Pep Guardiola's getting, you can have that plus £1. You can be £1 more paid. You can be the highest paid manager in England. You get me success here.
Well, if Ferguson were still involved, how would Fergie react to Guardiola and this ridiculous possession game they have, or the high press game that Liverpool have? For Wenger at his age to be able to sort of come up with new ideas to go along with, and to kind of be relevant in a game that's evolving so quickly, was going to be asking a hell of a lot, really. And coaches, there's a demand for immediate success now, I suppose, but for the likes of Wenger to be able to reinvent himself and to reinvent his team, and I think Fergie was very successful because he had a good squad, and he was always able. And I think there are elements of this a bit at Cork City as well. Caulfield may not be a brilliantly tactical coach, but there's so much demand for a place in the team. You just kind of have to perform, and there's an element of a little bit of fear that if I don't perform, I think that was with Ferguson as well, if I don't perform, there's somebody better than me and I need to do it. But I don't think, I'm not sure I think Fergie may have gotten out at a good time, in the sense that it's very, very hard to play against Guardiola's team at the moment. And I think one of the most defining moments in terms of the aesthetics of the season was when they lost to them in the league at the Emirates. I think it was 3-1. And Wenger he looked like a lost soul on the bench. It was really sad.
I think as well that one of the things that Ferguson had was an ability to listen to his staff, to actually engage them in the thinking about how the team should be run. So Carlos Queiroz gets a lot of credit for making the team, that second Champions League winning team, that the style of play and evolving from the flat 4-4-2 to whatever formation, but certainly having more bodies in midfield, some of them kind of half forward, half midfielders, some of them more defensive minded. And that's never been the case with Wenger. It seems like Steve Bold is sitting there almost as like
a subordinate,
a beard, basically. It's like, no, he's just. It doesn't make any sense to have that and not to use it, or to get somebody else to help alter your thinking to a point where you believe they can make the team better.
And it's kind of sad because, all political careers end in failure, as they say, and there is a bit of that about Wenger, because when you look back at Bold, when Bold was playing with Tony Adams and the defence they had at that time, and Wenger brought in this kind of, I suppose, this thing which was completely alien at the time, where defenders would attack in open play, and he gave Bold and Adams, who didn't look amazingly gifted technical footballers, he gave them the freedom to actually express themselves going forward, and they ended up starting to score goals. But that just seems like a long, long time ago now, and that's because it is. Yeah. And now Wenger is he has a team of pretty players, but a team that just is very, very vulnerable against very, very energetic sides like City. And even yesterday was
So add the steel of Simeone into that, or even a Benitez, with somebody who understands exactly how to defend.
Is Benitez a runner, I wonder?
I think so, yeah. I think he has to be. Look at what he's done on a limited budget. Look at what he's done with loads of money. Look at what he's done. Knows English football really well.
And do you know what the other interesting with this is? Benitez, there's a concept out there that his teams don't necessarily play great football. Now, that's partly true, but they actually he put good players there. He will put good players there, and they will actually play conservatively, but they'll actually play decent football. I don't think Arsenal fans will mind that, to be honest. At this stage, do they really care about
perfect marriage of George Graham and Arsene Wenger?
Yeah, who cares about pretty football after a while? You know, it just gets a little bit deflating when you watch nice, pretty footballers give away terrible goals as well.
Here's Brian Kerr speaking to Ian Beach about Wenger's departure and his future plans. This was after Today FM's game on Saturday, Watford against Crystal Palace on Saturday's Premier League Live.
He loved the club. He was dedicated to the club. He resisted the temptation of, I'm sure there were magnificent offers, more money, new challenges, some a bit nearer his original home, although I think now he would almost consider London his true home, given how long he's been at Arsenal. But, you know, what will the next challenge be for him? That remains to be seen, and where will he go? But I find it amazing that he doesn't seem to have much interest in anything else in life other than football. We now don't associate him with anything else. We rarely see him at any other event other than to do with football, and that's quite extraordinary. It's brilliant. I understand that type of obsession, but I also think for such an intelligent, brilliant, charismatic man, that there should be other things in his life other than obviously his family, but other things that he should be enjoying now. And at this stage of life, maybe he will go and do some of that. Maybe he'll take a time out. We do a Guardiola on it and have a year or two out and go to the States and appreciate the arts and other sports in America. Maybe he'll do something like that, or maybe he'll just go back into another job with the same mad obsession as he showed at Arsenal.
Where do you want to see him?
We spoke about this in a different context earlier. You get this, he's a football manager, and therefore I think I'm a football manager and I'm nothing else, and there's a lot of a world out there beyond that.
Yeah.
If Wenger goes to a new job, just wondering there, do the players have this kind of thing at the back of their mind that I know the Arsene Wenger of on the wane of the last few years, and I'm not sure I fully respect him, and I think I might be able to get away with stuff a bit.
Maybe.
And I think we might be a soft underbelly here.
Yeah.
You know, because it's kind of like a lie told often enough becomes the truth. If the narrative is that Wenger is failing, maybe the players are going to believe that. His next job, can he go on from this?
The PSG job is apparently gone. Thomas Tuchel is almost nailed on for that. So
he was never a runner for.
I mean, that would be amazing, though, wouldn't it? Just to see him spend the billions,
yeah,
just to fritter it away.
Would that not be the antithesis?
It would, yeah.
You know,
but imagine like that, a late career where you just decide, I mean, everybody else is doing it. Why shouldn't I?
That's one thing I will say. You know, the way that Arsenal has been run, notwithstanding the fact that their ticket prices I think are very high. At least they're doing, you know, I find it despicable that clubs can just buy their way to success and contravene every rule in terms of, because I just think, what's the point? And as a supporter, I don't think I'd enjoy that, to be honest. I'd much prefer if a club were run like Arsenal has been run in that respect.
Yeah.
But Brian makes it's a very good point there. Does he have to be a football manager?
I mean, probably not. He's very rich, so he can do whatever he wants.
That it doesn't matter in a way, like, you know. I don't think it's just he needs to be driven, obviously.
Yeah. It's a late career now to be thinking of becoming a brain surgeon, but
yeah, it might be a little bit late.
So David Moyes ripped Declan Rice after Rice made a bit of a howler. So a ball it's 1-1 with 81 minutes left on the clock in the game at the Emirates, and West Ham are doing really well, and the ball gets whipped in from the left hand side. Rice ducks, and the ball goes over his head and into the back of the net, and Joe Hart immediately points the finger at him, going, why'd you do that? David Moyes pretty quick to point some fingers in the aftermath too.
Yeah, I think up until about 81, 82 minutes, you'd have said we're looking as if we could be well worthy of a point. We defended well. We'd had one moments in the first half where Marco got free a couple of times and maybe fancied him to get a shot away. But look, we've all been young players. The young player makes a really poor mistake for the second goal, and I hope he learns from it because he's got big potential. But I think it really flattened the team by that.
Was there communication error? It seemed like you ducked, but...
No, I don't think there was. And anyway, if you was, then if you're a centre half and I've been one, the ball's getting played into the 6-yard box. The last thing you do is let the ball go. You talk about it after, you head it clear. And to be fair, we had done most things really well defensively. You know, we had tried to be inch perfect on our defending, trying to stop Arsenal. And we knew we had players who could cause them problems if we got enough of the ball. But the goal in the end, I have too many attacking players on the pitch as well. When we go 2-1 down, you know, it means that, and they get the third one, it's just too difficult to get back into it.
Do you think he got a shout from Aubameyang, Declan Rice?
No, but if he did, I wouldn't count that. What you do is you head the ball clear and it doesn't really matter. The ball's coming right on. It's not as if it was a massive jump or end. It was just, hey, there, why you would duck and leave it. So, look, the young boys played great in the last couple of games. And that's what young players do. And that's, I read Arsene Wenger's notes today about putting young players in the team and what it is to put young players in and how difficult it can be in the Premier League. I happen to think that playing young centre halves is probably the hardest position now in the pitch, even harder than playing a young goalkeeper. And I think Declan's done a really good job.
In fairness, you read those comments, he's like, oh, the young players, and it's like, ooh, he's thrown them under the bus. But then you see that and he's just naturally disappointed. The mistake was a bad mistake and he seems relatively magnanimous about it.
Well, I don't know. 2-3 years ago I went for the job to get the Irish editorship in the Racing Post, and I didn't get the job, but in the thought process leading up to it, I was like, if I do get this job for the first time, I'm going to be a boss and I'm going to have to deal with people under me, and the key is to treat them differently because they are individuals and you have to treat person A a lot different to person B because they have different work ethic or whatever it is. So the only way I can exonerate Moyes here is that if he feels that Declan Rice needs what he said there, because otherwise I think it's reprehensible to put him under the bus, a young player like that. I think that's desperate bad man management. You know, if I were Declan Rice...
What did he say is so bad though?
He said, well, he basically blamed him, and he says here, you know, it flattened the team.
You see,
it flattened the team.
When
You're at fault for... Now, you can do this in the dressing room if you see fit, fine. You cannot do that.
I think when you read it, it reads much worse. So when I read it, I was like, Jesus, he's really hammered him here. But when you see him, he's just deflated, honestly, and it is exactly what happened.
I don't care, to be honest. I really don't care. You cannot...
You shouldn't tell the truth.
You can't... Absolutely, you should not tell the truth in a press conference like that. You don't need to say anything. Just say, listen,
we're all grown-ups.
There may have been... He's a grown-up, but he's a young player. This, confidence-wise, unless he feels that Rice needs to be told this, and he's going on the mindset of, I think he'll benefit from this, which I would speculate is not the case. He's blaming a young player and he's magnifying the mistake that was made in front of how many million people on TV watching.
Is he not just holding him accountable for his actions and saying,
do it in the dressing room,
don't do the Premier League.
I don't care.
This is the Premier League.
Don't care.
And you are responsible. Don't duck the next time, Declan.
First of all, we don't know what happened here. If he were in that's a fairly straightforward header. So basically, Rice can head that any day of the week, no problem. Now, if at the last moment he's like, okay, well, I can't head this because I'm after getting a shout, or if I do head it, I'm going to head it tepidly because I'm doing this at the last minute and I'm caught between two minds. Something happened there. It's a bit, you know, a bit like Kevin Horgan in Shamrock Rovers and Greg Bulger, the mistake they had for against Bowes, and Bradley then blamed Bulger for actually confusing the goalkeeper, which again I don't think he should have done, because you don't single out players for blame unless there's a really profound reason, which there isn't here. A poor mistake flattened the team, and he goes, why would you duck? So he's made several references to it being a bad mistake. You cannot do that in a press conference. Well, like, what age is Rice? 19 years of age.
I think he's right to here's Rice's tweet, right? I'm young, I'll make mistakes. It's all a learning process to get to the top. Thank you to the fans who were brilliant. Love Heart Hammers. Ready to bounce back next week, full stop. He's doing all right.
If there are 20 managers in the Premier League, how many of them would have come out with that blame game? It's all about the individual blame game, and it's they say it's the golden rule of management: never criticise a player publicly, and I think that's shocking, man. Management, to be honest.
Do we not need to get over this though and actually identify mistakes and say, yeah, it was a reasonable team performance, but this one error it's clearly the pivotal moment of the game.
What is the point?
Because Declan Rice ain't going to do it again.
Cost us. as a player, Declan Rice knows he's made a mistake. He could come out here, defend his player and say, to be honest, I'm not sure what happened here. There might have been a communication mix-up. We'll deal with it in training. Move on. That's it. I'm not blaming my 19-year-old kid.
And sorry, David. Say he did get a shout. Is the right thing to do as a former centre half yourself? Shouldn't he just header it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, possibly, yeah. Obviously, I don't really know what happened. Back in my day, I suppose it was a different game as well. Blah, 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 blah. Talk a load of crap, just get through it. Don't blame your player. Especially not a 19-year-old player with a big future who basically will be feeling pretty bad about things as it is without his manager putting him under the bus. The
FA Cup semi-finals, mostly important because we're going to get one final opportunity to see Antonio Conte versus Jose Mourinho. As long as Chelsea don't somehow sack Conte in advance of this. I don't think they will now because there's no point.
Yeah.
And they don't want to pay any extra money than they're going to have to pay. They can do some kind of deal in the summertime. But obviously they had the spat early on. They had that kind of proper hatred for each other. Somebody intervened. It all calmed down. Hopefully we can ratchet it up for one last tour.
Absolutely, yeah. And Conte were underdogs against United, but that means nothing. It doesn't mean nothing really. It means that, like, statistically they're less likely to win the game, and that actually does mean something because generally the market is quite accurate on this. But it's going to be an interesting final. I mean, a good final for the cup, I think, as well. You know,
both teams need it.
Yeah.
It's not like some additional thing at the end of the year where they don't really care about it and they're putting out kind of a mismatch of this team because they're holding themselves for something else. It's like, no, this is the best possible team to win this because they're absolutely gagging for a trophy.
Yeah. I watched Man United against West Brom and they were poor, but in general at the moment they look like a team that really is playing well, and they you know, I think that Man City game just gave them a lot of belief, and Pogba looks like he's finally coming somewhat good. It's going to be a fascinating final actually. I'd fancy Man United to do it, but I think we could do without Man City being in the final. I think it's just good that they're not there.
Yeah.
And yeah, Conte, such a lovable character. It's quite sad what's happened this season, but that's going to be a good final.
That's how Chelsea rolls, though. It's like you win a league, you get sacked the next season. You win a league, you get sacked the next season.
It's horrible. You know, the way that club is run is just, I don't know, it's horrible to watch.
Who will you be shouting for in that game?
I used to be a big Liverpool fan, and obviously ABU and all that, but Manchester United haven't really been all that relevant in terms of the title, and I'd be fairly neutral on it. Depends on who I bet, I suppose.
All right. One final point for you here. This is a video from Copa 90 presenter Eli Menjum, who shared this video of Napoli's 90th minute winner against Juve from a basement in central London for a game thousands of miles away. He tweeted, "The same will be happening all around the world right now. Football is the greatest sport on earth. Don't at me. Final second is me slipping over from the beer poured on the ground in celebration." Have a look. That was because the title race in Serie A is still alive.
I remember going to London a couple of times, and one of my friends was Italian, and they'd bring us to a bar and watch Italian games in the bar in London, in some pub that showed it. And the Italian fans, and they were actually Napoli fans as well, it was just so funny. Like they would just get up and just kick a chair out of the way, like, and just go absolutely mad for this somewhat meaningless kind of Serie A game. And if you haven't been to a game in Italy, I'd strongly advise it. It's great crack. But
where have you been?
I've been to San Siro, Parma, Genoa. I've been to...
I was at San Siro when
Atlanta.
Paul Ince was there, so it's not today or yesterday.
No, it's not today or yesterday.
20 years ago.
People would forget that he was at Inter actually.
Season. It wasn't great. It was empty and it was kind of huge. I'd like to go to one of the smaller stadiums.
I'll tell you what you should do, right? So if you fly Ryanair to Milan, it's Bergamo's the airport, and Bergamo is actually where Atlanta play. And Bergamo, nobody stays in Bergamo. They just go on to Milan and they get the bus in. Bergamo is beautiful, you know, and Atlanta play there. So we went to Atlanta Inter, and the Inter fans basically threw flares right at us. Like, we were in that Atlanta section, and they landed like right beside us. It was actually kind of quite mad. But one of the big issues with Italian football now, it's very, very hard. Do you remember the problems they had before with the guy getting killed on the way to the Juve game, I think? And it's very hard to get tickets now, so it's becoming a lot more kind of controlled, but you have to show passports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But our restaurant friend Nick Ryle used to arrange these like €10 return flights, and we'd go to Milan for nothing. Like, and I remember paying into the Serie A, right? I remember paying in to a San Siro game, great seats, for €14, and at the same time, under Nick Leeson, Galway United were charging €25 to watch the game from the stand in the Premier Division, and we weren't a good side at the time.
Yeah, there you go. Sometimes you got to cut your cloth to measure.
You do, but a little bit of an upturn in Italian football at the moment.
Yeah,
you know, it's
relevant again.
Yeah, it is relevant again, and I really did mourn its kind of loss of relevance in the last sort of 10 years. Just the money wasn't in the game.
Let's talk Punchestown, will we? And how are we going to win some money this week?
We need to win some money, Ger.
The big
Your WhatsApp groups are letting you down.
They are, yeah. The big story, obviously, is whether or not there will be a proper competition when it comes to the trainers' title. Is it a done deal? Is Gordon going to win?
No, definitely not. Like, one bookmaker this morning, I think, is 4 to 6 that Willie Mullins will win more than Gordon every day. So that's 5 days he's going to win more every day. So if he wins more every day, he needs to find about $500,000. But there are 4 $250,000 races, right? And the first one of those $250,000 races is on Tuesday, where Duvan and Min could conceivably finish first and second, which itself would be 200 grand. All of a sudden, it's 300 grand.
Yeah.
That's so
Game
40% wiped out. Willie, last year, he won it with a bit to spare. Despite narrowly losing out in 2 of the big races, he still won it with a bit to spare, and he had about 400 grand fined. So the really interesting aspect of this is Sam Crow, who's a novice, I think will run against the senior hurdlers on Friday to potentially deny Willie winning one of those 250 grand races and to swing it to Gordon. And I think he may need Sam Crow to win that race. Now, whether that's a factor in Michael and Eddie O'Leary of Jigginstown actually deciding whether this novice should take on the seniors or not is a moot point. I think it probably is, because I think professionally they abandoned Willie Mullins, whether they like it or not, in September of 2016. They put most of their eggs into Gordon Elliott's basket. They thus want Gordon Elliott to be very good, which he has been, and they want him to win the title, preferably at Willie Mullins' expense. Whether or not they say that publicly, and they're more savvy than David Moyes when it comes to public utterances, they do want Gordon Elliott to win the title, and it may hinge on possibly the best horse they've ever had in Sam Crow. So will they help Gordon Elliott? I think they will.
So they've got to pick. What are the options for Sam Crow?
So he has sort of 3 options, really. He can, two novice races or the champion hurdle. Now, last year they ran a novice in the champion hurdle, but that was Lebaik. And if you remember Lebaik, despite the fact that he was owned by a very dubious set of people, as has been well reported, he also was a recalcitrant, and he planted himself at the start very often, which he did earlier in the week. So he was running a novice company, planted himself to start, didn't fancy it. Whatever they did, they managed to get him to run on the Friday, but they pitched him against the senior hurdlers. So they're going to do that with Sam Crow. Now, Sam Crow is a much, much better horse, and long term, they're wondering, could this be the Great White Hope, better than Don Cossack? But notwithstanding the consideration of the title race, they don't know whether they want to go hurdling next season or chasing, and they also don't know whether he's a Gold Cup horse or a 2 mile horse. And running him against 2 mile hurdlers, the likes of Mellon, will help clarify a lot.
Okay, so that was your tweets, which was who's going to go off favourite. Will it be Mellon or Sam Crow?
That was with Rory Delargy on the Matchbook podcast, and it was actually we were talking about this at the time. It was kind of like we were discussing this podcast, and while we're discussing this, I'm actually going to put this up, and this is the way modern social media is. By the time we end this podcast, I can be able to tell you that I was right, or at least that people will agree with me. But it's 85%, I think, voting Sam Crow, because he probably shouldn't be favourite in crude form terms, but the hype is so big about him. It's kind of like, should we start the 18-year-old out half or the 25-year-old that has achieved more? Well, the 18-year-old is just something special. He's better. And Sam Crow, I think, will definitely go off favourite. Now, it's not set in stone that he'll run in that race, but I hope he does. It'll make for a hell of a race. And if we're into the Friday and Gordon is like 200 or 300 grand up, something like that, will he be like, this race is going to decide everything? And Sam Crow winning could engender a lot of relief there.
Just before we obviously spoken before about the golden age for Irish racing. Is it cyclical, or is this actually now the fundamentals of the industry are that you have massive investments at every level? So you've got big owners with loads of money, and you've got big trainers who understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and that is actually now how it's going to be. You know, the whole notion of English football success being cyclical, well, actually it's not really cyclical. They always have the money, or have now for 20 years had the money from TV, and that seems like it's going to continue. So that's the most important money league in the world. Is Irish racing now at a point where you're always going to have an O'Leary and his money and his family's money, and you're always going to have a McManus and his money and his family's money, making sure that the owners always have trainers who are good enough to do this?
It is the economy, stupid, really. It is about money, you know. And I backed Preston to beat Norwich the weekend, and the bet didn't go my way. And I was kind of thinking, why did I back Preston to beat Norwich? In the overall scheme of things, their budget is quite low, and they shouldn't be beating Norwich. And I'm backing them because they need to win the game. And it really, like, football's all about money, and that's why that's why Italy's been struggling. That's why England's been doing so well. Racing's all about money, and it's essentially all about prize money. And prize money in Ireland has been very good relative to Britain. But that has been down to the government basically paying 50% of it. That's not going to go on forever. Absolutely no chance. Leo Varadkar is pictured wearing a Leinster jersey today. He doesn't look particularly kind of natural wearing a Leinster jersey, but what will Leo Varadkar think in terms of pumping money into racing? What happens if a left-wing government comes in Ireland? Like, there's no way racing will get these handouts it's been getting. So racing needs to be able to support itself and put prize money into place that it's better than Britain. It is cyclical, but at the moment there's far better prize money in Ireland than Britain, and it's much more economic to have a horse in Ireland than Britain. So the horses that came through point to points that were sold to Britain are now being bought by Michael O'Leary, and as long as Michael O'Leary and JP McManus have that urge to have horses, which may not go on forever. I mean, if Michael O'Leary pulled out in the morning, there'd be a big sea change, you know. There wouldn't be an owner to take in, like, they spend an awful lot of money on young horses, and they don't really care how much they spend to a degree. So it's cyclical, but I don't see Irish racing being in any trouble in the near future, but it's completely down to prize money.
All right, what are we looking at? How are we going to get back on the winning?
We need help.
Yeah,
we need help, really. I think Sam Crow's 5-2 to win on Friday. He's 5-2 because people don't think he'll run in the race. I think he will run in the race, and he'll go off odds on, if not favourite. A little treble maybe with Penhill, Sam Crow and Footpad to win the 2 mile novice race will pay around 7, 8, 9 to 1, something like that. But Sam Crow at 5-2 at the moment. This is a slight long-term bet. He's only running on Friday. If he runs in a different race, you have to put your hand up and say, I made a calculated investment that lost.
Yeah.
I won but I lost, or I lost but I won. Sam Crow will win, I think, if he runs in the race.
When does the non-runner no bet kick in?
No such thing for Punchestown.
All right.
So you need to be declared, and then obviously it's the same as if it's a non-runner. You get your money back any other race. But let's not worry about that. Let's just hope that he runs in the race and wins.
Are trebles not the fastest way to the poorhouse?
No. You just, as long as you're getting an edge on all 3 horses, and hopefully we are. But Footpad is 1-2. He's nothing to beat. Penhill would be the slightly suspect one of it. But you know, we want to bump up the odds. We need a good price winner. You know.
Yeah.
And I think Sam Crow's the bet at the moment. But if you follow me throughout the week, we're doing a bit on a few very social media forums. I'll and a few medias. I'll keep people updated on my tips throughout the week. But hopefully we have a good week, because it's 5 long days.
It is 5 long days. It's a long old festival.
It's a long old festival, and you know, if you're struggling by Friday, hopefully Sam Crow will get you over the line. But I feel like I've learned a lot about rugby today, actually. I think this could be my new betting truck. Yeah, I thought Brian really educated me on the ins and outs of the game there.
You did have one of the world's best rugby players of all time sitting beside you, so I hope that
I'm not trying to big him up, but I thought he was really good to, like, he actually made it interesting for somebody who's not that interested in rugby. I wonder, will he take my betting advice in the future?
We'll have to wait and see. Watching it off the ball AM with a Google Chromecast, perfect dinner time viewing from Brisbane. Well, hello Brisbane. I hope the weather is as good there as it has been here for the last couple of days. Although there was a nip of winter in the air this morning as well.
I cycled in actually just like this. It was fresh, but it's a little bit cold. A little bit cold.
Our 2 days summer is over. Right, it's been a pretty amazing weekend of sport. We didn't even touch on the boxing. Carframpton had a very classy win on Saturday night. There is a full week of us to look back on stuff at the weekend, and there's plenty to look forward to as well. Off the Ball on the radio tonight on News Talk from 7. Stay tuned to offtheball.com for updates right across the day. Johnny, thanks very much.
Not at all, Ger, anytime.
At UI_Main.
Wee Manya, it was an old kingdom back in the days of the old Irish kingdoms.
Right.
It had part of Leinster, Connacht, bit of Munster, and where I'm from was one of the little parts of that kingdom. When I went on Twitter initially, it was like I wanted to be anonymous, but then my ego got the better of me. Such is life.
There you go. That's the lesson.
Am I better off? I don't know.
Well, follow that anyway for your tips this week. Good luck.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.